r/AskReddit. Serious police of Reddit. Who was the worst criminal you've ever had to detain? What did they do? How did you feel once they'd been arrested? Oh boy. Grabbed a guy walking down the street with a shotgun in one of those 12 can holder cigarette companies used to give away. Yeah. I'm old. We get the cuffs on him, and he starts getting all chatty in car about all the other guns that he has. One thing leads to another, and we use his statement to get a warrant to get the rest of the guns. We go to the apartment with the warrant and there are hundreds of different firearms and corresponding boxes of ammo, and we start cataloging it and carrying it out. Then we notice cases of photo albums and videotapes. And it's child porn. I take random samples, and as difficult as it is, and to the normal human being, it's difficult hit. Confirm that it's children being photographed doing Excel things. It's logical that given the sampling, that the rest of it was kiddie porn. 2. Well, not enough for the adder who took the case. I explained to her how we arrived at the number, and she said that in order for him to be charged for all the porn, that I would have to testify that all of it was indeed porn. I was the arresting officer. I was swearing out the complaint, and I also had to make sure asshole went to jail for a very long time. I sat in a room in the station house for hours on end going through hundreds of photo albums full of children being destroyed. I viewed videotapes of innocence being swept away, and in the end, I wept. I did not stop weeping for days. 20 some odd years later, I still have my moments, and every so often I'll see a kid that looks familiar and I'll think. It haunts me constantly because I couldn't save them. I'm supposed to defend the ones that can't defend themselves. That was my sacred vow, and yet, all I could do was catalog their horror. Years later, I was a first responder to the WTC attacks and saw horrors that no person should ever have to see, and yet, 9/11 wasn't close to being my worst day on that job. Thanks again, Reddit, for letting me rant. Hi. I was used in child porn when I was little. I just wanted to say thank you. I don't blame you or any other police for not being able to save me. No one could. I was invisible. It means so much to me that someone might have witnessed what happened to me or my fellow abused brothers and sisters. No one in my life really knows my history, and sometimes that makes it feel like it's still invisible. It's good to know that just maybe once, in a crowded precinct, in some back office, someone else, a complete stranger, loved me enough to weep for me, that maybe someone else knows my story. Thank you for having those photos and films destroyed. I cannot tell you how it haunts me when some random man gives me a second look. I wonder, in this age of the internet, did he see me online? Is some version of my younger self being downloaded over and over again on the dark web? If one day someone knows it's me, will I be in danger? The children on the tapes you destroyed are safer because of your work. They can't thank you because they don't know how you are a part of their story. So I thank you on their behalf. Thank you. It's good to know that just maybe, once, in a crowded precinct, in some back office, someone else, a complete stranger, loved me enough to weep for me. Wow. This really drives home the story for me. I'm so sorry this happened to you. This guy and his wife start fighting in their apartment in South Los Angeles. It escalated into the guy picking up the 5-month-old baby and charging at the wall with the baby's head as a battering ram. He then threw the infant out of the 3rd floor window. As I sat in the front of my police car with this guy, cuffed in the back seat, all I could think about was a Pulp Fiction type turnaround and put a hole in his head so it would ever happen again. It was very early in my career and made me think about whether I could handle 25-30 years of these kinds of things and what kind of person it would turn me into. The child actually survived and the man convicted. I'd put this incident away in a little sealed box in my head and forgotten about it until seeing this thread. Now I'm sweating and angry again. Edit for some additional info. As I've sat and thought about this, I know that the baby had a fractured skull and they were concerned about brain damage in the neck/spine. I know that the child survived, but I never followed up because I completely put this out of my head, and until the thread popped up, you could say that I'd completely forgotten about it. The best I can recall was that the guy got 18 years prison. Thanks for all the concern and support. I'm okay. But just for good measure I might have a chat with the depth psychologist about it. It's a big city. Bad things happen, and as the hydraulic press channel would say, we must deal with it. Some things get to you more than others. But for the most part we learn how to deal with it, and not take it home with us at the end of the day. I've been on 23 years with a few more to go yet. With all I've seen and done, I have one rule that I live and work by: treat everyone as well as they will let you treat them. It has served me well. The baby survived a 3-floor drop. Damn tough baby. Babies are simultaneously so fragile and super resilient. It's weird. Edit. Not gonna lie, I'm a little upset that my top comment is now a throwaway offhand comment I made about babies, and not any of the comments I actually put thought into. Why don't you just gild it while you're at it? P. Edit 2. No. I didn't make a throwaway for this comment. Yeesh. A fellow who molested a number of his preteen daughter's friends. He'd have her invite them over for movies and such. Then drug their Sunny D and ate them. We never figured out exactly how many girls he aped, but we were able to prove up 28 counts. The arrest was not particularly satisfying. Having to be near him and listen to his diatribe made me feel unclean. His conviction and subsequent long sentence made me feel like being a cop was worth it at least 1% of the time. What was the gist of his speech? I don't recall exactly. But essentially the usual rant about how his rights were being violated. They weren't. How we had no evidence. We did. How he was being framed like anyone cared enough about his very existence to bother with that. Etc. Ad nauseum. It wasn't so much the content of his speaking as the fact of it that was offensive. Man convicted of molesting a 7-year-old girl. Got placed on probation. Walked by me at Walmart one day, holding hands with a 6-year-old boy. Edit. It was the grandson of his new girlfriend. Similar to his previous victim. Typical of his offender grooming profile. I stopped him in the store. We got a hold of the boy's paternal grandfather who came and picked him up. The guy's probation sentencing was messed up, and he didn't have the standard ex-offender conditions of probation. No unsupervised contact with children. No living near schools. etc. etc. So literally nothing happened to him. Except for those conditions being added the next week. What did you do? Legally. Especially as a cop. What can you do? Copy and paste of a previous post, because I don't enjoy typing this story out. Cop here. I responded to a child not breathing. On arrival I find a 2-year-old girl. Wearing only undies. Unconscious on the cement kitchen floor. She is freezing cold. Pale. Foaming at the mouth. And barely breathing. I spent the next 6 hours by her side as detectives learned that mom's boyfriend was pissed that she wouldn't stop crying. So he picked up by the waist, over his head, and slammed her on the ground. Twice. When mom got out of the shower he told her she wasn't breathing right. Mom uses the girl's asthma inhaler twice. And waits. An hour and a half later she goes to her neighbor's house to use her phone to call her mom. The neighbor overhears the conversation about baby not breathing and takes it upon herself to call 911. The girl received a basal skull fracture which caused little seizures. She vomited several times, but lay on her back for over an hour. She aspirated the vomit repeatedly. For nearly 2 hours that little girl lay on the ground with her skull bleeding into her brain. Her body temp being sucked into the floor. Trying to breathe vomit. And for the next 6 hours I sat with her. And held her hand. Stroked her hair. And watched her die. Hoping that her little brain shut down and blocked out everything that was happening. That case still makes me tear up to this day. And it was one of the 3 worst calls I've ever been on. I don't know how someone can do that to a baby. Edit. I apologize for the lack of clarity. I wrote this last night through tear-filled eyes and then went to bed. 1. Paramedics were called. They arrived seconds after I did. They did everything they could. I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. 2. I stayed with her the entire time, because in a possible death investigation we keep an officer with the person throughout. Until the medical examiner takes custody of the body. So I stayed with her in the went to court scan with her, etc. Her little brain had been deprived of oxygen too long. There was no surgery that could save her. 3. BF fled during the initial chaos of officers and medics arriving. He was caught later that night. Without incident. He was charged and convicted. But that doesn't undo what he did. 4. How do you deal? That's a good one. You come home and hug your own kids. You have a rear with the other guys that were on scene. You realize that if it weren't for your job, assholes like that would get away with it. And then you get in your car and do it all again tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be good to each other. Stories like this and others can be found at /r/Tales from Thesquidka. Edit. Hey guys. Thanks a bunch for the overwhelming response and support. Quit with the gold. If you want to pay it forward, next time you're in line with a cop, buy his coffee or soda and say thanks for what you do. Those little moments really do help. Thanks for sharing your story. The link is broken. So here's a working version. /r/Tales from Thesquidka. The earliest memorable person is a 16-year-old who killed 2 men by stabbing them in the head with a screwdriver. He was just acting the hard man in front of his mates and picked on these 2 guys for nothing. The thing that got me was his complete lack of remorse or regret. I'd never properly understood what a psychopath was until then. Edit. My mistake. He was 17 at the time of the murders. I had dealt with him before when he was 16, so I mixed up the ages. Also, it was in Ireland. What the actual duck? How does one manage this level of insanity? I don't know. It was pretty brutal. Only 1 stab wound each